Recording in
Hi, Alejandra. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Just fine. Just fine.
Good. That's good to hear.
You can measure the season by how dark my room is during these meetings.
Yes. We all have to adjust.
Always.
At least appreciating the sunshine.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yes.
Excuse me. Sorry. We are very close to a quorum already, so just give it another minute or two and then we'll get started.
Hey, this is Andy Papachristos. I'm going to be in the car for the next 15 or 20 minutes, but I'm here.
Okay, and do you want us to stall the part that's your working group until you're out of the car?
That would be fantastic. This is an oddly timed flat tire situation. Not that there's ever a goodly timed flat tire situation. So working on it.
I apologize.
Well, if the city of Evanston could do something about nails in the street, that would be fantastic.
I assume it was a nail in a street outside of Evanston city borders.
No comment. It was actually a screw, so, but still.
I appreciate the clarification. Okay, well, so now I've got conflicting imperatives. On the one hand, I'm supposed to stall.
I'm sorry, there's also Evangeline said the link is not working for her.
Oh,
someone could
great.
Someone could resend the link. That would be looks good.
Yeah, the one in the agenda didn't work for me, so I went to the calendar invite and that one worked.
Oh, interesting. I used the one in the agenda.
Interesting.
Can someone put a link that would definitely work for them to get here in the chat, and I'll email it to Evangeline?
Yes,
I emailed her,
Oh, you got it? Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
but we'll see if this one works for her. I don't know.
Thank you, Sarah, also. Oh God, oh God, oh no, 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 no. Ooh. Sorry, I accidentally clicked on Sarah's link while I was trying to copy and paste it, and then anyway, it doesn't matter. I maybe overreacted to that problem.
A very dramatic response, Mr. Mayor.
You know, what you really want in a mayor is someone who panics far too easily.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay, well, we do really have like a really fabulous quorum and a good attendance. And so out of respect for folks' time, I will get started, and we'll just, we'll make sure to get Evangeline the right link as we work through the procedural items at the top of our agenda. So I'll begin by calling the November 9th meeting of the Reimagining Public Safety Committee to order. We have a quorum, and we will begin as always with public comment. So is there anyone anyone who's not a member of the committee who is seeking to give public comment this afternoon? Doreen Price.
Hi. Anyone else?
We'll let them raise their hand while you're going, but let's start with
Okay.
you.
Okay. I read and was delighted to see how much progress you made on this ticket to enumerate where the what do you call it, the bottlenecks can be, and I sort of took that as part of what I was reading or how I was reading it. And one thing that can be a bottleneck besides politics, which you all hope goes away sometimes, even though I know Mayor Bisk knows how to explore that really, really well. I'm not one of those. The reimagining the police has to do with exercise of police powers, whether it be the police or city inspectors. So when you talk about ticketing, it reminded me so much of the inspectors and some of the issues that have been brought up recently that has been mentioned at city council about inspectors and their relationship with residents and stuff, not just inspectors, but the city staff interactions with residents. So it would be a positive thing and not a bottleneck, because it would definitely counteract whatever good you're trying to achieve. Or if you want to bring attention to a cause, you let the city operate in a way that's caused problems. And if it could be avoided by the approach you take, that's another approach as well. So it's not my decision in terms of strategy, but it occurred to me that it's very tightly woven together as to, do you do one first or you do both? So anyway, you talk about develop a model for division or unit that oversees and coordinates trauma-informed violence prevention. Yes, 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 a million times yes. Determine how it best fits within the existing Evanston infrastructure structure. That's the non-police part. And if it means what I just discussed, that's great. In more words, of course. Victim services begin with complete needs assessment. I agree 1,000%. We think this can be done with staff. I disagree with that. In terms of what I've seen and what I've experienced, I think we need to go, and you've heard this at council, to have an outside group. And I think Council Member Reed brought up the need to have outside, in this case, similar minds as suppose where actually they live. And if they live in California and they have this approach that is a little bit beyond the middle, but something that's doable, then that's good for us. If it's too progressive, I understand that there's a problem because we don't have the ability to push back in a way that's going to make it work. And then if it's too conservative, we go backwards in terms of ingraining things we want to change. So knowing things as a change agent also, I know that works against us. So that's with regard to victim services. In terms of and I suggest that we get resident support there, which is missing in this document in some places, and this is one of them. Revisit and further develop Evanston specific model that taps into the local existing services. Yes, yes, yes. But beyond those services, to imagine if we had our own public health service and could have local people working to help residents and in a continuous fashion, which for trauma is super important to have continuity, whether it's drugs or trauma or like me, PTSD. Further develop scaffolding. This is cool. Including a process evaluation that provides insights and opportunities for program improvements. Yes, 1,000 times. Understand priorities and coordination of services across existing and development efforts and programs. Yes, but the caveat there is with a new vision and a new view, which your group is starting. So reimagining them too. Then last is the outreach services, which I can't emphasize enough. And that one has to be done differently. And your group has tried with regard to outreach, and the number of commentators right now are really kind of on the low side. And so it'd be nice to increase that somehow. And to do that, maybe to get some input from grassroots. There's grassroots organizations that have yet to be tapped or have tried to work into larger groups. I know the CASH group that I'm affiliated with has failed to integrate and that wanted to have integration in something like, oh God, joining forces. So it's still a vision, but it's not happening. And so people want to do it, but it's something that needs to be done by people who are committed to it. And this group seems very committed to it. So I suggest this group can lead the way. So I develop an existing specific street neighborhood outreach service program based on existing models. And I think it should include both the police sector and the enforcement, which should be amenable, both of them amenable to having social services oriented kinds of things. So for inspections, as Council Member Reed knows, that with regard to inspections and things in the Fifth Ward or wherever they're going, that they can be done in a way that's fair and equitable and not in terms of hit or miss based on a neighbor who doesn't like you for reasons that may not be, actually it's never valid, but at least reasons they think are valid. What can we do next quarter? Continue fact-finding conversations with leaders, models in the space, plus the residents, emphasis on that. What is an intermediate step? That is a huge question. I've spoken long enough, so I'll talk later if you need. Further develop scaffolding, including a process evaluation that provides in-use opportunities for program improvements. Again, tack that into, if it's an online system, to resident input. And the more resident input you get and people appear up at meetings, that would be one way to attack them, bring them in. What does this look like in 3 years? Develop with the metrics and process evaluation. I'd say we see a positive change in culture, and that people start working together in the way that this group is working together, because everybody has different points of view, but you know what we're trying to accomplish. If we don't agree that we want to help people who are vulnerable, it's not going to happen. And we've seen some resistance from the city. And just to be completely open, I don't know where it's coming from, but this could be one of them. And that's it. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Is there anyone else who's seeking to give public comment this afternoon? All right. Seeing none, let's move forward. We need to address the minutes of the previous two meetings, September 28th and October 26th. Would someone like to make a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
A second.
Councilmember Reed moves approval of the minutes, both from September 28th and October 26th. Sarah Bogan seconds. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay.
Aye.
Was there an A? Okay. For a second, I thought it would be 1-0, just Patrick, but then everyone joined in. So the motion carries and the minutes are adopted. This brings us to item 4, the report outs from the two groups that are on item 5 of the agenda. I'll start. The Breaking Down Data Working Group doesn't have much to add, given how much our work was a focus of the last meeting, but we did meet in the intervening time and committed to continue working on the other items that we hadn't yet kind of reached resolution on, and we'll definitely be back to you with thoughts about our progress over there. For the Rethinking the Organizational Structure Working Group, I'm told that Councilmember Reed will be presenting in lieu of Councilmember Burns.
Yes. Yeah, very, very brief. At our last meeting, we heard from Evanston Fight for Black Lives, about their action plan to remodel Evanston's police force. And we'll use what, and the goal is to use what the committee at our next meeting to use what we learned. I'm sorry. To use what we learned from our conversations with the Moran Center, Evanston's Fight for Black Lives, peer services, and so forth and so on, to begin actually modeling out a new organizational structure for the department. So that's the update from the organizational structure committee.
Thank you. Does anyone have any additions or questions? And obviously, Sarah was sort of referenced there without speaking. So if you want to add anything, Sarah, jump in as well.
That pretty much covers it. I think one main point was that there's a lot of overlap among the various subcommittees and committees outside of this committee when it comes to these conversations. So I think what we're really trying to do is stay focused on looking at each position and coming with a plan that could maybe web in the other initiatives happening.
Great. Thank you very much. Any questions for Councilmember Reed or others on the working group?
I have one. Hi, Sarah. And I've been going over the plan and stuff. It's really insightful. One of the things I did have a question about, and haven't had a chance to go back and find the union contract. Oh, excuse me. The union, I gotta get some water. The union contract. And in the paragraph on the bottom of page 17, and where you reference that with people, policemen that are hired, and how things would be structured and everything. And you mentioned the management right clause that's in the union contract. I know this is lazy and I should do this, but exactly what page and section of the contract was that could help me? And if you had it somewhere that you could show that as an attachment to this document to read, because what we was doing here at CNP is to look at your document and see how they correlate with with the CNP proposal and everything, and how it meshes in together, and how it would be working in the two groups proposal working in the community. So if you could point me to that section of the contract, that would be good.
I don't know off the top of my head, but I will work with, we made this over a year ago, but I'll talk to the group, and when I find it, I can just update the packet and add it in, as well as email that to you. Or the group.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much, Sarah.
Great.
That's all I have for that.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ms. Esther. Any other questions for this working group? Okay, then let us move forward. I don't know the status of Andy's road trip.
I'm about 3 blocks from home, but we could start. I just don't have the document open, obviously. So I can walk through the 3 main points, and we could start digging in.
Great. And also, obviously, I don't know whether you and Evangeline had a particular I will just hand it over to your working group to move forward as you see fit, and looking forward to the discussion.
Great. So I know Evangeline's here. I don't know who else from the committee is here, but let me just start by thanking everybody, Allison as well, who helped us kind of pull everything together. As you've heard us report back before, really our focus has been on thinking through on the ground violence prevention efforts, continuing to acknowledge that these need to be done in conjunction with more transformative sorts of approaches to violence prevention. And the proposal, I think, that you have in front of you focuses on three key elements. There are plenty of other things to do. There's plenty of other work to be done. But we looked at these three things as really crucial next steps in Evanston's, objective to reimagine public safety and how we can deal with violence and victimization. So broadly, the three recommendations, and perhaps what I can do is just state what they are at a large scale, and then we can kind of go in each of the order. One was really developing an entity, a unit, a department that focuses specifically on violence prevention. And again, I don't have the document in front of me, but at a very high level, the importance of this from our perspective was having trained staff, and for us in particular is being trained in violence prevention efforts, not just service provision more broadly, but having experience, including lived experience, that deals with issues of violence prevention. And as we've mentioned in previous meetings, these sorts of units and offices and departments, there's a lot of work being done across the country in helping establish these things. So we believe that's important for coordinating. I think even one comment that came up in public remarks, coordinating these efforts across the city, including the private and sort of nonprofit sectors. So that's one recommendation. Recommendation two, which Evangeline will speak to and has been leading up, was really considering and looking at what does a holistic and victim-centered approach to victim services and victim response look like in Evanston, and how do we coordinate what the city's doing with the county and state, but also really making sure that those services, again, are staffed and coordinated with professionals that are specifically familiar with trauma-informed care. Again, going back to one of the presentations at our first meeting, that's item two. And then item three, which I think we've currently listed as street or neighborhood outreach, looking at reaching folks who are currently in harm's way or engaged in activity that could potentially lead to violence where they are, and developing a holistic, trauma-informed, victim-centered approach with programming, potentially jobs, all sort of linked up. And again, here, and I'm sure we'll get into these details, there are lots of models being developed nationally that are looking at best practices and what this would entail. So those are the three, again, high-level recommendations: developing an office of violence prevention or unit, department, this sort of a victim centers, victim services, and a neighborhood outreach sort of effort. So I'm pulling into my home. I will be in front of a computer in 2.5 minutes, but those are the three sorts of areas that I think we want to open for discussion in our proposal.
Great, thank you. Did you guys want to go into more detail before opening it up for discussion, or do you want to pause at this point for kind of questions and feedback?
Well, I defer to the committee. I mean, I think the most of our recommendations were in that document, the core ones. I'm happy to expand on any of those things. Evangeline, if Nathan is here. Cicely was also involved in these conversations. So I think we can go into any of the specific areas. I would recommend we take it sort of, the department, victim services, outreach kind of in some order rather than jump around. But I think we can go into specifics any way we might like.
Great. Do others, Evangeline, did you have any preferences about?
No, I'm prepared to provide a little more detail, or maybe take a pulse and see where people are thinking right now before we do that. Nathan is also on the call, Andy.
Yeah, I agree with that, Evangeline. I think that just taking a pulse, see what individuals are saying, and we can expound if necessary.
Great.
And then give Andy just a minute to get on his computer as well.
Perfect. So let's do that. So let's just open it up either for reactions or questions and we'll try to structure this so that there's we leave time for the group to give kind of more in-depth detail
Recording in progress.
afterwards. But yeah, questions or reactions to what you just heard and what you've read? Look at that. Kristen.
Oh, yes, sorry. Every time I forget how to raise my hand. Let me lower my hand. I think it's exciting, you know, being part of an organization that does a particular aspect of violence prevention work. We are certainly on board and see the necessity and the value to the community. I think that to me, what stands out is the opportunity to think more deeply as a community about violence prevention and what we mean by that. There are different spheres of and kind of different types of violence. And so I know we've been part of an effort in Chicago with the police department and street outreach organizations to bring the lens of sexual assault and domestic violence prevention to those spaces. There can often be sort of a culture clash in terms of strategies and best practice and what the emphasis of that outreach and prevention is. So I think there's a lot of interesting conversation to explore there around kind of the parameters of what we define and the type of violence that we seek to prevent, because they're just really different strategies depending on where you choose to focus.
Yeah, so the one thing I would add to that, other than yes, is even in that space, and I believe the rest of the committee also, as we talked about this, making sure that the people that are dealing with that are trained in that, right? I think you highlighted some of the tensions that outreach in Chicago and others experienced during the pandemic, you know, having to do that, which would require, you know, having specific sets of folks and specific sets. So I think what you said aligns and with what our committee was thinking.
Thank you. Other comments, reactions, or questions?
Yes, not a question, kind of a reaction. Last year, CNP had a workshop, and we did a workshop, and it was around sexual harassment and sexual violence and everything. We worked with several groups in trying to pull them together to see, okay, what did they want to do? How did they want to do this? What did they want to do? And there was, and it was with District 65 Family Focus. The Y was there, and we also had the young lady that is with the sexual, oh, I forgot the name of the organization, but she is the person that kind of represent the state and for the outreach in helping to talk to people in the community and to educate them about domestic and sexual trauma and everything. She has an office down in the basement of the Civic Center. And we tried to get individual community people to come back to get involved and to talk about it. They did not, and so we didn't get it going, but we got the conversation going to the point that people start looking at what is this? What is sexual violence? where is the different agencies and things in town that one could go to. So we did that as an outreach event, and we wasn't taking it on as to run that. Once we get fully staffed, we probably will run more program, but mostly we got the information out there to the community. And one of the things that was surprising to me that came from one of the District 65 staff, and she was concerned and wanted to know more about the Title IX action and what it meant. And that was in terms of with girls and things in sports. So we still waiting to hear back from her as to when she would like to put together a program to present it to the community. Right now, we haven't heard, but this unit, what you're talking about is what things that was brought up in that meeting of May of last year. So it's good to see that it will continue and work on getting the information and things out to the community and where one would go to this. So with this department, the mall and everything, where would it be located? That was one of the questions I want. So where would you locate it? It says develop a mall or a division. So where would this division be? So would it be in a building at the Civic Center or in a building all of its own? So where would the mall program be run out of?
So just as in response, I don't have the answer to that question. I think what we know is what other cities are doing, and to the larger effort. By the way, my apologies, Kimberly, I didn't mention your name as part of our group, so I just wanted to make sure I recognized your efforts as well, and anybody else I missed. But I think we know what other cities are doing, and we need to think about what's right for Evanston. I think the focus, and everyone should correct me if I'm wrong, was that it needs to be part of the city and whatever is the most appropriate way, and that the staff have explicit training and experiences in these issues, which are multifaceted and complex, right? So there are places which may or may not make more sense, public health, health and human services, whatever. So where it actually fits, I think, is totally open for debate. I don't think we have a recommendation, but I think what we say is it should have power. It should have staff. It should have resources. We've felt, and I'm going to say this very directly, you don't want to set it up and then it fails, right? You don't want to set it up, especially with people who have lived experience, who are giving their life to it without resources, without having the ability to make change. So we feel like it should be an entity that has resources, that has power to make decisions and coordinate with all the ways that other departments do. But where it sits, I don't think we had an opinion on that. I think we wanted to have that discussion, but it's an important question, I think.
Okay, no, it is in the information and stuff that goes with this department. This model is crucial that the information as to what it will be doing and how and where get out in the community for the people to take advantage of this. That's it.
Yeah, and I just want to add that, I think this group I mean, obviously, Nathan and Councilmember Fleming have been heavily involved, and so there's certainly a lot of knowledge about the city that's been brought to the table. But I think they've been very humble, I guess I would say, and trying not to dictate exactly the org chart solution as much as the explaining what criteria the thing that gets set up has to satisfy if it's actually gonna work. I think as something that I've shared with the group that, is just a practical answer is, I don't think it's really in the cards for this entity to be a department. If you think about the city departments, like the, Parks and Rec department, let's say, or the community development department, you're talking about big operations with dozens and dozens of people. And I think it would be in practice likelier for this to be inside of a department. But again, that's something that I think can be worked out as long as we're clear about what exactly it needs to look like in order to be successful. Kristen.
Yes, I just wanted to add on what Miss Esther was saying, since she brought up our two school districts. I think we can't underscore enough the role that our school districts play, since they are the largest youth serving institutions in our community. And quite often the sort of interpersonal harassment, bullying, violence in schools are antecedents to the violence that happens outside in the community. And so, and it's not, I'm not like speaking behind anyone's back when I say school districts can get very uncomfortable with letting partners in to really explore and interrogate kind of how the districts are addressing interpersonal violence, whether it's sexual assault, domestic violence, or teen dating violence. And so I think that should be, I would hope that those would be key stakeholders in the conversation, because without collaboration with the school districts in really meaningful, substantive ways, I think that the city then is sort of locked out of the places where youth spend the most time, and really accessing them in those, their sort of more natural environments where they spend a lot of time with their peers.
So I'd like to echo that. And I think that that's been part of our conversation, as well as on other subcommittees that I'm on, making sure that the schools are very much centered in the exploration of services, like an alternative response model, like what we're suggesting here for this shared unit. And I think it's also important to highlight, Evanston's had a victim service function since 1976, according to the city website. And so over time, a lot has changed, right? We've had this legacy of service, but, services provided by the unit have changed. The reporting structure has changed. It originated in the police department, and now it is over in Health and Human Services. And how it has worked with youth, the youth component, which was called youth outreach, back in 1969, when that started, like those relationships have been there and have been altered over time. And so we're really looking at kind of taking that step back and recommending this staff needs assessment to really help ensure that these units, or the combined areas within the unit, really have a clear purpose and guiding principles to help guide the work. And then there's an understanding about the most pressing needs of the community now, and that making sure we have the staff to meet those needs. In the survivor community, it's really important that everybody is considering everyone who is a survivor in the wake of violence, including witnesses and neighbors and classmates who are directly impacted. And we also think that the needs assessment will help to ensure that our city has this coordinated and equitable and trauma-informed response for survivors across departments in the wake of a violent incident, particularly when there's a person who's been harmed that lives in one ward that is different from where the harm occurred. And Nathan and I talked about this a lot in our group. There could be an incident of gun violence, and usually the response is around where the harm happened and not necessarily where the survivor or the victim's family is living, which could be in a totally different ward. making sure resources and responses are addressing the needs of all the neighbors in all the areas. So we do think like the assessment will really help set up the future and the vision for what this can be, so that the most critical support that survivors may be seeking, which can change over time, right? And can change based on the type of violence that's experienced. And then also, how do we align the resources and services that exist within the city to the available services within the nonprofit sector, as well as the local, the county, and the state levels? There's been a lot of work, especially at the county and the state level, to expand survivor support and victim services. And so the last point goes really to what Ms. Esther was speaking on, which was that this assessment will really help to inform some sort of plan to communicate about these services. I think there's no doubt that people support having both of these services in Evanston, but I think there's a lot of mystery about what each area does, right? And what does service look like? And what in my moment of crisis, what can I expect? Or when I'm feeling like something's going to bubble up, how is the youth outreach team going to be able to support me, right? And so this will really help not only form a plan to communicate about the services and educate the public in multiple languages and methods, but also help to establish some sort of continuous process for evaluating and revising these services to make sure we're always meeting the ever-changing needs, because that piece is missing right now, and I think it's really critical.
Thank you so much. Is there, I mean, I don't know, I found that personally really, really helpful. Are there kind of questions or reactions to Evangeline? This is the problem with clarity. People have no follow-up questions. Well, so
the only thing I would add, just now I'm going to muddle it a little bit, but I think just to summarize a couple of things in Kristen's point and others is we want to make sure that the sorts of interventions we were talking about, whether it involves school-aged young people or older young people, the actual victim's age tends to be older, which requires something different than, say, someone who's connected to school as someone who's disconnected. So I think our hope is that this unit will do that differentiation to make sure that what the young person is receiving, or the victim of a sexual assault is receiving, is not this is appropriate, and not, you don't just give everybody the same thing. And that's the sort of and we don't have the recipe for that, other than acknowledging it's really important to say, here's a young person who is connected with, say, this school in D65, and here's a 27-year-old who's disconnected, who has been, locked out, disenfranchised, and they need something different. And all those things can be coordinated in ways. And that's the lesson learned that we want to hope to kind of start for discussion. And Evangeline's point in this space, I mean, her expertise, and Nathan's, for example, is really, there's a treasure to Evanston, and including others we haven't even had in discussions yet. So I think that's where the excitement comes from.
Great, thank you. Before we reopen it for more questions, did anyone from the working group, especially Andy and Evangeline, who are, I think, kind of held the pen, so to speak, for a lot of the writing, did you want to just expound further on anything in this outline, any aspect of it?
Well, Mr. Mayor, I would love to, but both of my group mates have done such a fantastic job. There's really nothing more to outline, but I just really echo both of you all sentiments, and you've done a fantastic job of articulating everything. So I think I'm okay right now.
I'm going to keep adding, because Nathan's also too modest, and something that Councilman Reed stressed in one of our things when we were talking about outreach. The goal is not just to locate and connect people, but to create something that says Evanston, that has connections to life affirming and giving sorts of resources, right? Whether it's, I'm making these up, so this is not any model, but when we look at other models, they include transitioned whether it's therapy or life skills or education or work. And oftentimes these things are now being pieced together that include cash transfers and stipends, right? So you're identifying individuals that we do with traditional, say, outreach efforts, and then you're connecting them to an effort, which again would be created in Evanston specific, pulling in experts, and it would be a thing, a program, an entity that would include payment. And there are these models that are being done that we had mentioned before. And again, the modesty of the rest of our committee, there are wonderful ways we could do something like this in Evanston and have an impact in the short and the midterm that then could probably align with larger term things that are on the in the Evanston vision, whether it's reparations or universal income or all these other things. This is a small way that could kind of have that spirit there. We don't know what it would look like, but part of it was really thinking about not just find them and tell them to stop, right? But really think about best practices and put it in something that represents the sort of spirit of it. And again, I'm just taking all their ideas and putting it here. But we don't know what it looks like. That's what we hope to have. That's why we use the word scaffolding, to think like, here's some parameters. What would it look like in Evanston? What would it look like for 20 people, for 50 people? What would it look like in schools, for example? Like it would be different, but I think we have smart enough people and experience and people that love the city that could do that.
And I would just go on to say, Andy, you did a fabulous job, but it's not only just preventing violence, but you're also helping individuals reach their fullest potential. And I think that is prodigious. And so this Office of Violence Prevention counts for so much more than just what the title of it stands for. So I think that's something that is happens underlying, but it's really not just prevention, but it's also the development, and it's cultivating our society and our community. So I think it's great.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's such an important thing to add. There's a continuum of functions and a continuum of benefits here that, I think we've got to see it in that way. Are there other questions or reactions to any of this material? All right. So, 2 weeks ago, we had a presentation from a different working group that had some pretty kind of specific policy changes. Stop doing traffic stops for, for equipment violations, for example, which is very easy to imagine in your mind how to translate that into a city ordinance or resolution and put in front of the city council. This group, has been so much more, broad and trying to figure out how to build something. It's not necessarily the case that every word on this proposal would turn into an ordinance that would pass and change the city code. But on the other hand, in my opinion, these are specific steps that this working group is calling upon the city to engage in. And so my understanding is that the group was interested in putting this up for a vote of the committee. And I think that's appropriate. Again, not because we're voting on a specific ordinance that council could then adopt, but because we're giving really we're putting the stamp of approval on this committee on a direction that we believe the city ought to go. Is that a fair assessment of kind of the way you all were thinking about this?
With probably the added hurdle of creating subcommittees or something like that, whatever the fraction of a committee is. To all of these issues are going to require more work to think about, whether it's assessments and what an actual proposal could look like.
Yeah, well, I'm sure everyone's appetite for creating subcommittees is super great. So that's, but yeah, no, I think your point is, all kidding aside, really important. the downside of not just sort of having a policy change that you can write in an ordinance is that we're giving out a lot of homework, and that homework will be done methodically and deliberately, and it won't be overnight. But I think if this is a blueprint that the committee believes is the right blueprint, I think it would be constructive to have a vote that memorializes that as a kind of expression of that commitment, and then essentially a strong recommendation to the city staff. And if the working group is offering implicitly or explicitly to continue being a part of that work, rolling it out, I think that would be enormously beneficial. But even if folks, I know at some point folks will be tapped out and move on to other things, I think even if that is the case at some point, still having clarity about what we're trying to achieve and clarity about the level of support that these ideas have would be of value. So with that, if someone wants to make a motion on any or all of this, now would be a great time for that.
I'll make the motion near this, that the recommendation that is coming from the violence prevention work group, that we continue to look at this and work and make it into reality, not just here on paper, but make it a reality here in the city. And thanks, Andrew, Angelina, all of your group.
Well, thank you for what I have to say was an extremely eloquent motion. So Ms. Esther moves that we recommend that this become reality, that these recommendations become a part of how the city is structured and what kind of services we provide. Is there a second?
I will second.
Second.
So the first second, which is a weird thing to say, I believe comes from Sean Peck Collier. So the motion was made by Ms. Esther and seconded by Sean. Is there any discussion before we move to a vote? All right, seeing no discussion. And I just want to reiterate my apology from last time. It is particularly perverse that Nathan is not going to vote on this, given the role he played in putting it together, but the rules are the rules, and as officially on the books, city staff are not members of this committee. So that's why, that explains why some names that we feel ought to be called will not be called. Sarah Bogan.
Aye.
Betty Bogg.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns, I believe, is not here. Marcus Campbell, I believe, is not here. Betty Esther.
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming, I believe, is not here. I'm sorry. Alejandra Ibanez.
Aye.
Patrick Keenan Devlin.
Aye.
Andy Papachristos.
Aye.
Sean Peck Collier.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Evangeline Samark.
Aye.
Kimberly Walton.
Aye.
And Kristen White.
Aye.
I'm sorry. And Daniel Biss also votes aye. I apologize. I don't know why this is so difficult for me. So by a vote of 12 voting in favor and none voting against, the motion carries. I want to echo what everybody else has said. This is really, really a remarkable amount of time and energy, and just really, really great thinking that this working group has put into this. there's no questions. This is not the end of the road by any means. But it's a pretty clear arrow. And I think we have a responsibility to follow that direction and do what we need to do to make this reality. So thank you for that. And I know that there's been some pressure on you to sort of take what were a lot of really big ideas and put them into this kind of format. And I know that was not easy, but I really appreciate the work. And I think the city will really benefit in very, very meaningful ways from this. So I just wanted to say thank you very much for that. Allison Leipziger, who, for those of you who don't know her, is the city's policy coordinator.
Thanks. I just wanted to say that as many of you know, on Friday's my last day before I go on maternity leave, so I will be back. But I just wanted to say that I have really enjoyed working with this group and all of the working groups so much. And I'm so excited to see where we are when I get back in February, and happy to jump back in and show off a little baby. So yeah, it's just been really lovely working with you guys so far. Thanks.
Hey, Allison, it's been really great working with you as well. And I'm going to miss saying hi as I walk back and forth every day. But, thank you for all the support, and thank you I know we've been on a couple of meetings and Zooms and different things like that, but it's been great. And congratulations to you and your family so much.
Yes, thank you, Allison.
Yeah.
Thanks, Allison.
Thank you. Congratulations in advance. Good luck. And yeah, we'll look forward to the addition to the working group in February. So I keep on talking about our value statement on the agenda, and I keep on skipping it because we're literally over time when we get to it. So now we have 5 minutes left, which is really not doing the project justice. Just as a recap, this is something that's been sort of hanging over our heads throughout this time. And there was some really generous help in putting together a draft that was then followed with some folks who took some time to make recommendations in the Google Doc. And so I guess the question that I want to ask, rather than launch into a discussion about it, which I know we will not be able to do justice to in 5 minutes, do folks have an interest in really taking time? This is definitely kind of we've already gone and put the cart before the horse, I guess, and the cart's going off and being a cart without a horse. Do folks still, notwithstanding that, want to spend real time in one of our subsequent meetings? And I promise, if the answer is yes, I will make it happen on a scheduling basis to really go through the draft that's been produced and the changes that have been suggested and come to some agreement about that for the future. Is that an exercise that folks would find valuable given where we are in our work?
Yes, I would. And I have a request, and kind of we talking about value, and like we have all of the different organizations here, and each one of them probably have their own set value for their organization. Could we have those give those out there to see how common are the values of the people that's made up this committee? And from that, we will probably come out with a powerful value statement. I would like to see that.
That's a great suggestion. So I saw to my initial question some yeses and some nods, and Ms. Esther makes a great point. So what I will do after this meeting is send an email to the group asking folks to share with me the value statements or related statements that your own groups and organizations that you represent have, and circulate all of those to the group before the next meeting, at which point you have my commitment. We will carve out real time to have an honest, truly inclusive discussion on this. So it'll be on our next agenda, but unlike all the other agendas, it'll actually be observed. And we'll gather that information in advance, which I think is a really great suggestion. So thank you for that, Ms. Esther. And with that, and just again, sharing my appreciation to the working group for all that you've done to bring us to this point. Seeing no further business to come before us, the November 9th meeting of the Reimagining Public Safety Committee stands adjourned. Our next meeting will be Tuesday, November 23rd at 4 p.m. and I'll see you all then. Thank you very much.
Thank you, members. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a
Good
great
evening.
evening.
Thank you.